The Wicked Will Rise, Chapter 8. Later that afternoon, I once again found myself at Queen Lulu's chambers, which the monkeys had transformed into a makeshift courtroom. Mambi was on trial. In addition to being queen of the monkeys, it turned out that Lulu was also the chief justice of their Supreme Court, and she was presiding in a long black robe and a crooked white judge's wig, clutching an oversized gavel in her paw. All around the room, the members of the Monkey Council were perched on whatever spots they could find, all of them outfitted in somber courtroom garb, monkey style. The hours following Mambi's surprise arrival had been a blur. We had no idea where she'd been or how she'd found us. Within seconds of her collapse, a retinue of monkey guards in beefeater uniforms had swept in. Apparently her teleportation spell had tripped their alarms. The wingless ones had not been amused to have yet another witch in their presence, and as they'd hauled her motionless body off to the monkey slammer, it was unclear whether she was still even alive. If she was dead, it was even more unclear how I felt about it. Of all the members of the order of whom I met, Mambi was the one I trusted the least. She had lied to me more than once, and she had always seemed to have the most right to call herself wicked. But, for better or worse, I had bound myself to her, in more ways than one, and on top of that I had questions I needed to ask her. Queen Lulu had declared that the trial be held as soon as Mambi woke up, if she woke up, and while Pete, who Lulu oddly had been unsurprised to see instead of Ozma, had been barred from entering the Queen's chamber, I had been chosen to act as Mambi's lawyer, for reasons I couldn't make sense of. Now, here we were. I had heard of kangaroo courts and even monkey trials, but this was taking it to a whole new level. Not that it mattered much anyway. I'd been in Oz long enough to know that courtroom procedure around here didn't have much in common with what I knew from watching SVU reruns. In Oz, in my experience at least, there was no due process, no Fifth Amendment to plead, and if the judges were sassy, it wasn't usually in a well-meaning, salt-of-the-earth kind of way. It was usually more like sassy psychotic. For Mambi's sake, I could only hope that Lulu was a more even-handed judge than Dorothy had been when I'd been put on trial. "This court will now come to order," Lulu barked from the bench, which was really just her throne. "The despicable crew known as Mambi stands accused of high witchery, gross dishonesty, untold crimes against the monkeys, outrageous trespassing, and general unpleasantness. Also, she's extremely unattractive. Miss Amy, do you speak for the witch?" I was standing behind a long wooden table that had been set up in the middle of the chamber. I'm not actually a real lawyer," I said, addressing Lulu and the rest of the monkeys. "But do you really think she's fit to be put on trial? Look at her, she can barely stand up at all." It was true. On her best day, Mambi was haggard and withered, but you only had to spend a minute or two with her to realize how tough she was despite her old age. Today was the first time she'd ever truly appeared fragile. There was something about it that was unsettling, and I was reminded of the first time I'd ever really understood that when my mom was relaxing, she was high as a kite and not taking a funny kind of nap. It was the feeling you get when you realize that the person you've always looked to for protection can't help you at all, that she, not you, is the one who needs taken care of. Mambi was leaning heavily on the table, hunched over, her shoulders trembling as she strained under every breath. It was no secret to anyone in the room that she was in serious pain. She had a stool next to her if she wanted, but she was standing. You had to give her credit for poise. I had to get her out of here and make her get better, if for no other reason than because she was my best chance at figuring out what was going on, not to mention my best hope for finding Knox. "Your Honor," I said, addressing the Queen as politely as I could. "Your Royal Honor," Lulu corrected me in her high-pitched nasal sing-song. "Sorry, Your Royal Honor," I said. "But I think we need to get Mambi to someone who can help her. It's zip-zip," Queen Lulu barked, pulling her fingers across her lips. Suddenly I realized who she reminded me of. Judge Judy. Now this was a version of the law I recognized. Back home, Judge Judy was my mother's favorite show. Mom was always coming up with enemies she wanted to face off against in Judy's courtroom. You know, like our landlord, the lady in the next trailer over with that annoying dog, the bartender at Patio Hooligan's who wouldn't serve her a third drink. She was always sure she would win. Big surprise, she never quite got around to filling out all the applications to get Judge Judy to take her cases. The good news was that if this was Judge Judy, I knew how to deal with it. Basically, I just had to suck up. It's an honor to appear before you today, I said to Lulu, smiling smearingly. She seemed pleased at my defense, and she shuffled some papers around in the front of her. I looked over at Mambi. Are you okay? I whispered. I'll be fine, she muttered through gritted teeth, but she didn't look fine. How should I say you plead? I asked. Mambi wheezed. Guilty. She cackled to the room at large, doubling over at the effort it took just to laugh. Miss Gum, Lulu said sternly. For some reason, procedure, she was refusing to speak to Mambi. Please remind your dear rich friend that the sentence of her crimes is death. I'm sorry, I said. Can you remind me exactly what her crimes are? The words were lost in the pandemonium that had broken loose as Lulu had announced the penalty, and the rest of the monkeys began hooting and chattering and jumping up and down. Kill the witch, screeched a monkey, the one who had looked so cute in his little green overalls just yesterday. Burn her, a smaller monkey shouted. Then they were all yelling at once. Melt her with water. Make her pay. Witches get stitches. Queen Lulu let the pandemonium go on for a long spell, looking extremely pleased at the scene she created. Finally, when things were threatening to get truly out of hand, she hopped up on her seat and waved her tiny furry fists. Shut up, she screeched. She didn't really seem angry, just excited. All of you, I'm in charge here. The room snapped into silence as they heard Mambi clear her throat. Her eyes turned back to her. Monkeys of the court, she said. Her voice was measured and quiet, but had a commanding edge to it. If I may speak. Mambi gathered herself up and stood tall, clearly trying to summon as much dignity as she could, given the situation. I stand before you bruised and bloodied, she said, laboring over each word. If this were Judge Judy, I'd probably have assumed it was all show, and that she was playing the victim card, but Mambi looked like she was in real pain. My comrades, the Revolutionary Order of the Wicked, are lost, scattered to the four corners of Oz. An Oz whose future has never been more in doubt. My magical abilities are almost completely drained. In short, I am a shadow of myself. Why? Because I have been fighting a war for many years. I have done this not for power, not for glory, but for Oz. I fight not just for myself, but for the munchkins and the gnomes, and yes, for the monkeys, for winged and wingless alike. You ask me how I plead. If I am accused of fighting for those who cannot fight, then I refuse to pretend to anything other than the truth. Of that crime, I am guilty. As she rolled along, I could see a fearsome glimmer of the Mambi I knew returning as she marshaled the little strength she had left to make her plea. She was building up steam. But what of those who can fight and choose not to? Wingless ones. While you covert mindlessly in the trees, far from the trouble below, your brothers and sisters are in chains, forced to serve their mistress's cruel whims. You turn your backs on them simply because you think that they are not as brave as you. Need I remind you that what those backs look like now? Did you deform yourselves, pay the ultimate price, just so that you could cover your eyes and ears to the truth? Is this bravery? She fluttered a quivering hand around the room dismissively and went on. But I am not a young witch, and I know very well that monkeys do not learn new tricks easily, so I do not stand here asking for you to fight. I only ask that you grant me a safe harbor, so that I might continue to do battle on your behalf. I was impressed. Even after all the time I'd spent with her in the Order's headquarters, I'd never been completely convinced that she was really the freedom fighter she claimed to be. As much as Knox had always sworn otherwise, I'd always had a nagging suspicion that maybe she was just an opportunist, eager to get rid of Dorothy so that she could be in power for herself. Now, listening to her speech, I saw the true passion she had for what she believed in. It was hard not to admire it. The monkeys of the council all looked convinced too, and were exchanging nervous, thoughtful glances. The only one who didn't seem to be buying it was Queen Lulu. Her eyes were fury with anger. Save me the Staub story, sister, Lulu said. You talk a good game, but I wouldn't call bingo just yet. We all know who you are. We all know what you've done. If it weren't for you, Oz may not be in this mess in the first place. Or are you forgetting that little deal you cut with the wizard way back then? There was murmuring among the monkeys, but Mambi cut in. What do you want me to say? She bellowed, suddenly full-throated in a rage. That I'm nothing but a common bush hag like Glinda the supposedly good? You want me to say it? Yes, I've been wicked, and I regret my crimes. You want more blood? Well, if it's blood you want, you'll have that too. I promise. Just let it be Dorothy's blood, and mine if it comes to it, rather than your own and the blood of your people. Persecute me, not wingless ones. Instead, let me rest here safely to recover my strength, so that I can help destroy our oppressor before she destroys us all. With that, Mambi collapsed breathlessly into the stool at her side, and there was silence again. Queen Lulu stroked the hairs on her chin in contemplation, and then finally climbed up into the back of her throne. She slammed her gavel against the wall of the royal tree hut with so much force that the whole structure shook. "The court has reached its decision," she said. I took a step back in surprise. Wait, that was it? Mambi, as not even you yourself, despite the charges against you, you have been found guilty on every count. There was a murmur throughout the room, and I held my breath, waiting to see what came next. Was I going to have to fight to save her? The Tin Woodman fine, the Lion okay. They were both monsters, but I hadn't signed up to kill any monkeys, and I also wasn't going to let them just kill Mambi for no reason. Luckily, I didn't have to make that choice, because Lulu wasn't done. However, the Queen went on, in my role as monarch of the monkeys, I have chosen to overrule the decision of the court. There can be no doubt that Mambi is as guilty as a nun dancing the hoochie coochie on Sunday morning. Even she admits it. But for now, which, out of the goodness of my heart, I'm reducing your sentence and placing you under house arrest. She banged her gavel again. She liked that gavel. Justice has been served, she proclaimed. Miss Gum, you may escort the convict back to the princess suite, where she will be allowed to contemplate her crimes while she recuperates. But I remind you once again, no magic. Capiche? Capiche, your royal honor, I said. The court broke out into applause, and Mambi nodded solemnly. She stood and slowly began hobbling up to the door. When she got there, she stopped and looked over her shoulder, glaring at me. Well, she asked impatiently, are you going to escort me or not? I looked at Lulu, who nodded, dismissing me, and then followed the witch. I wasn't sure what had just happened. I was just glad it was all over.